is up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's JD here, and welcome back to another episode of Throwback Thursday, in which I talk about TV shows or movies that are at least 2 or 3 years old at the time of me making a video about them. So today we're going to be talking about Lovecraft Country. That was a series released in 2020 over on HBO, and we're going to talk about what was going on with the series and also its cancellation and all that stuff. I'm going to talk about, my thoughts. So the show ended up being canceled after its very first season, but I think it was a pretty jam-packed season. Okay, there's a lot that could be discussed. However, I do have my thoughts about that as well in terms of it being a jam-packed season. Okay, so it is based on Matt Ruff's novel that combined the horror fiction aspect of H.P. Lovecraft and also racism in America kind of into one thing, like one book. At first, I gotta admit, before we really get into the details about what happened and transpired in these episodes, I gotta admit the very first time I watched the show, I did not like it. But I'm gonna tell you why, okay? Just give me a second. I did not like it because I gotta be honest, I was not really paying attention when I had started watching the series. It's that simple. I was always on my laptop trying to edit another video, or I was writing something, doing something else other than actually watching and paying attention to the episodes. And this is the type of series that you have to sit there and watch, okay? I think HBO is kind of known for putting out shows like that, because if you aren't watching every single scene or actually really listening, you're going to miss something, okay? I'm just going to be honest, it's one of those shows where you have to pay attention or else you're going to miss important key moments that are going to make other episodes make sense. And I think Game of Thrones is very similar in that way, and also House of the Dragon. If you guys want to check out that video where I recapped mainly season 1 and like the first half of season 2, I'll link that video in the corner here. But Lovecraft Country definitely gives off a similar feeling to like House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones, where you really have to pay attention and be very involved in actively watching and paying attention to what it is that they're talking about. So yeah. Now it is set in the 1950s. That was the overall feel that they were going for. And the characters, okay, let's talk about the characters real quick, okay? So our main 2 characters that we focus on, we have Atticus Freeman, who's played by Jonathan Majors, and then also Letitia or Letty Lewis. So Atticus and all the other main characters definitely refer to Letitia as Letty for the majority of the show, so that's what I'm going to refer to her as. So we have those 2, they're our mains. And then we had Letty's sister, Ruby Baptiste. She's played by Wumi Masaku. And then we had George Freeman, who's Atticus's uncle, played by Courtney B. Vance. And then we also had his wife, Hippolyta. She's played by Anjanou Ellis. I'm probably botching that name, but she's Atticus's aunt. And then we kind of meet up with the Brathwaites, with Christina and all that, but we're gonna bring those up a little bit later. So the show, like I mentioned earlier, does bring up the whole racism in America aspect. It's based in the 1950s, and things are still very tense between black and white folks. And that's when we get introduced to the aspects of the sundown towns. And then also Letty, she was harassed for buying or purchasing property in a predominantly white neighborhood. And then we had Ruby, who was pretty much taking this poison from Christina because she really desperately wanted to be a white woman. And then we have Diana's friend, who ends up being pretty much Emmett Till. So they introduced the Emmett Till story. And obviously, if you look up that story, it was very heartbreaking. And that, along with many others, kind of pushed the civil rights movement forward in terms of really kind of cracking down and asking for certain things and certain changes to be made. And then also another thing that we're probably going to end up touching on is the fantasy aspect of everything, because like I mentioned already, the novel that this show was based on from Matt Ruff, it included the racism aspect, then also the fantasy aspect from H.P. Lovecraft. So that whole level of like fantasy and things happening that probably shouldn't be happening, like mystical powers, magic, that gets introduced as well. So let's get right into some of my favorite moments. Okay, so in the beginning, what really kind of kicks off this whole journey into like magic and all that stuff. We have Atticus. He comes back from the army, I believe. He comes back to the US because he gets a letter from his father, Montrose Freeman, who's played by Michael Kenneth Williams. Unfortunately, he did pass away back in 2021. But before that, obviously, he shot this show. Atticus, he gets a letter from Montrose thinking that he's asking him to come to this town by the name of Arkham. And I do believe it is a completely fictional city. It's not an actual place. I think it's just something that H.P. Lovecraft had came up with. But either way, it's called Arkham. I think it's supposed to technically be situated somewhere in Massachusetts. He gets this letter and he goes to his uncle because he doesn't really have anywhere else to stay except for his aunt and uncle. So he goes to their house, he stays there for a bit, and then he tells his uncle about the letter that he supposedly got from his dad. And the uncle is just like, you're not thinking about going down there by yourself, are you? Like, be for real. But Atticus seems very much so headstrong about trying to find his dad. Then we get to Letty, who I believe they were like childhood friends, her and Atticus. Letty, in this point in her life, she's still kind of drifting, bouncing from place to place, and she doesn't really have like a stable job or anything, and she has to keep on asking her sister Ruby for money and a place to stay, and Ruby's just kind of had it with her. You could see she kind of is fed up with it, and she's just like, you could stay for like a day or two, but Letty's just like, how am I supposed to find a job in just like a couple of days? You gotta give me more time. But you could see, even though they're sisters and they're supposed to be close, they have a lot of tension between them because it seems as though Letty was always asking Ruby for things, but Ruby's very disappointed in her also because she didn't show up to their mother's funeral that had taken place a little while before. So Letty, I think she's trying to go down to this town or something, and she decides to join Atticus and his uncle on this trip to Arkham because I think she originally was trying to go to another place. And then we find out that Arkham is actually a sundown town. This police officer is trying to chase them off the road, and that's when they eventually come across these mystical creatures that are trying to kill them in the forest. And obviously this is a very wild experience for everybody because they're just like, what the heck is going on? So we find out that these creatures are pretty much the pets, in a sense, to the Brathwaites. So we introduce Christina and also her father, Samuel, who is played by Tony Goldwyn. I believe he was in Scandal. Yes, he was in Scandal with Kerry Washington. He was the president. Anyways, we're not going to talk about that show, but we can talk about it in another episode of Throwback Thursday for sure. If you guys are interested, let me know down in the comments. But either way, they end up meeting the Brathwaites, and we find out that Samuel has this weird thing for Atticus because apparently Atticus is like the last living heir of this like really powerful wizard within their little group. I can't remember the name of all these people, okay? There's a lot of characters. Like I said, there's a lot going on, so if you're not paying attention, you will miss it. But before they're able to fully sacrifice Atticus because he didn't really fully understand what was going on, when they were trying to escape, Christina and Samuel end up tracking them down and basically shooting Letty, so she dies pretty much, but Samuel brings her back to life. But he also shoots Atticus's uncle George because for some strange reason Samuel is trying to use this whole sacrifice to gain immortality, I think was the overall goal. Sons of Adam I think was the group's name, right? Because Samuel ends up dying in this situation. Letty is still alive because he did decide to bring her back to life, but Uncle George eventually passes away, unfortunately. So now they have to tell Hippolyta, and Hippolyta's just like, I don't really believe y'all. So she kicks off her own investigation, and also with regards to his cousin Diana. She's a lot younger than he is, but she's still very much so not believing that her dad just died by a police officer like Atticus and also Montrose was saying to her. So Atticus is trying to deal with that. And Letty, on the other hand, I think she's just trying to forget everything that transpired in that forest, at that house, at that mansion. And she ends up making this purchase of this really old house in this predominantly white neighborhood. And you could see from the moment she gets there and starts moving her stuff in that people are just looking at her like, what are you doing here? Then they decide to start harassing her with the really loud noises, the horns and all that. And she tries to bring Ruby in on trying to make this into some type of boarding house or space specifically for Black people to have like a place to stay so they could like rent out rooms and whatnot. However, what Letty did not understand was, number one, the money that she got, believing that it was from her mother, her deceased mother, mother was actually from Christina Brathwaite. Yeah. So she got the money from Christina to buy this haunted house, we find out. That's the other thing. The house is haunted by the spirit of a scientist who was trying to do weird experiments on Black people. Was trying to basically take body parts from other Black people and mix them together in one human. He definitely was doing some crazy stuff. Eventually, we start to see the spirits of these people appear. But then we see in the basement where Letty is trying to do like her development of her photos and whatnot, because she's a photographer. You can see that the spirit of this scientist who manifests itself to her is very angry that she and all these other Black people are living in his house, because he was a very staunch racist. But either way, we finally are able to get this spirit out because of the death of two people, two of the white guys that were trying to harass Letty and everyone living in that house. We find out their bodies are in this underground cave. We find out that this is a tunnel leading to where we could find, I think, some type of like papers or something. Basically, it was connected to what Christina Brathwaite was looking for. So she could kind of do her own spell and basically replicate what her dad was trying to do with the immortality thing. However, that was kind of like the main storyline that kind of kicked everything off. Now I'm just gonna kind of jump around from episode to episode. So we have Hippolyta, who is going on her own journey. She ends up finding this time machine and she's able to jump around between different time periods. And she also, during that time, is able to really find herself, because at some point she had kind of lost herself during her marriage to George. And then also, while she's gone in this time machine, we see that Diana, the daughter, she is having her own weird experience with regards to magic, because these police officers find her in an alley and they curse her, and she is now able to see these two weird looking little girls' spirits, and they eventually possess her. And then I think at some point Letty and Atticus have to travel into some type of spirit world to contact his mother, who was also into magic, along with his grandmother, and they had to perform a ritual from the other side to basically break this curse that the police officer had put on Diana. And then she ended up losing her arm in the process. Her mom had to come up with some robotic arm for her. And then we had this weird love story going on between Letty's sister Ruby and Christina Brathwaite. Christina at first was using the body of William. Yes, when I say body, I really mean she was using his body. Okay, this man is actually dead, and she is using this potion to use his likeness, basically, and basically try to get Ruby into doing things for her by making her think that she's in love with this William guy. And Christina basically offers her this potion to be this white woman anytime that she wants. However, the first time that she's able to do that, it definitely was a out-of-body experience, literally. But eventually she started shifting into this white woman a lot more, because she really liked the power that she had and basically how she was treated in this white body compared to her being a Black woman. So it definitely is a way to incorporate the two things that I had mentioned in the beginning with regards to the magical fantasy aspect and obviously the clear racism and segregation period, where Black people really were barely even treated as human. So yeah, it definitely shows you that contrast very much so up close. However, I find the relationship between Ruby and Christina very interesting, because I was trying to figure out for the longest, like, are y'all into each other as like two women, or is this because you like William? It was just really strange. But either way, they end up getting very close. Now Letty is trying to find a way to use Ruby again, but use her in a way where it protects Atticus. It's not just for herself, because now we find out that Letty is pregnant. And also we have an introduction of a whole new character, the Fox Spirit. While Atticus was away and, you know, he was in the army, he was actually posted in Korea, and that's where he meets Gia. And she tries to take his memories and his soul, pretty much his life. She tries to kill him, but she realizes that she actually loves him and doesn't want to kill him. It was obviously his first run-ins with magic, and he was like, yeah, I'm not dealing with this. And that's when he ended up getting that letter from his dad, Montrose, and he went back to Harlem to talk to his Uncle George about it. Now in the end, Atticus does end up sacrificing himself to protect all of his other family members, and also Letty, who is carrying his child, but I don't think she ever tells him that she's pregnant. He just kind of knows because he ended up going after Hippolyta when she entered that time machine. And yeah, he knows that he has a son now. But he ends up sacrificing himself for them. But let's talk about the cons really quick when it came to this show. I think the season was way too jam-packed. There was way too much going on. They could have easily split it into at least 2 seasons. There was so many different storylines to follow. Even though there was an underlying story that connected everything, it was like there was a lot of individual stories that could have been kind of separated. But it does give me like an American horror story type of vibe. Now, when it comes to the cancellation of the show, it seems as though there were like 2 different reasons. Now, one being supposedly there was like a toxic work environment for everybody, but also secondly, there wasn't a compelling vision for the next season. So with that goes back, I think in my mind, it connects back to the idea of they really could have just split the first season into 2 seasons. It would have gave them a lot more time to figure out what they were going to do, at least for the 3rd season, you know? But I think they could have definitely split it into 2 and it wouldn't have been that difficult. But I think those were the 2 main reasons, and then also that it was getting too expensive to produce. But I think that's HBO shows on a whole. They're very expensive, but I think in some ways they do kind of get their money back because the shows usually end up doing pretty well. But you know, I could be wrong in some cases. I'm not sure with regards to Lovecraft. I didn't really look up the numbers with regards to that show in particular. But yeah, I think overall it was just a little too jam-packed. I think that was their fault. But at the same time, because it ended up being their one and only season and then they got canceled, it I think kind of left people like viewers like me not really necessarily feeling like there was something left to say and they needed a season 2, because they really didn't, because there was so much going on in season 1. The way they filmed it and the way they jam-packed it, it was like a pro and a con all at once, you know? But y'all can let me know how y'all feel about the show. Like I said, at first I didn't like it, but I think it was just because I really wasn't paying attention to it. But I gave it another chance not too long ago and I was like, this might be a cool show to talk about here on the channel. But y'all let me know your thoughts on this one down in the comments. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.